Hey there, it's me Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the description.
Later that night, back at the house, Ginger sat in bed, staring at the unopened pack of peanut butter cups on her nightstand. Pip had left them there. Hadn't said anything. Hadn't pushed. Just left them. Like she knew Ginger would eat them eventually. Ginger glared at the candy like it had personally offended her. Then, with a sigh, she grabbed the package, peeled back the wrapper, and took a bite. It was good. Too good. She hated that it made her feel warm. Hated that it made her feel safe. Because safety was a lie, wasn't it? She swallowed, staring at the rest of the candy. Then, without thinking, she tucked the second piece into her nightstand. For later. Just in case. Just in case she stayed. Ginger told herself she wasn't staying. She still told herself that. Even as the days stretched into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to routine. Even as her knapsack stayed untouched by the door. Even as the second peanut butter cup sat in her nightstand, uneaten but kept. She wasn't staying. She wasn't. She was just waiting. For what? She didn't know. But the longer she stayed, the harder it became to lie to herself. The house had changed her. Not in a dramatic, life-altering way, at least, not yet. But in the small ways. She found herself sitting at the kitchen table without hesitation, instead of hovering near the door. She found herself reading for pleasure, not just to kill time, not just to escape, but because she wanted to. She found herself falling asleep easily, deeply, waking up feeling. She didn't know. Not safe, exactly. But not afraid, either. And that was something. One afternoon, Mom asked her to help in the kitchen. Ginger hesitated. She wasn't used to being asked to do things. She was used to orders. Demands. Expectations with consequences if they weren't met. But Mom's voice wasn't like that. It wasn't a command. It was just a request. Like Ginger had a choice. Like she could say no, and it wouldn't cost her anything. That, more than anything, made her uncomfortable. Because choices had never been hers to make. She had spent years just reacting, just doing what she had to do to get by. So when Mom turned to her, wooden spoon in hand, and asked, "Want to help me with dinner?" Ginger almost walked away. Almost. But something made her stay. And she didn't know why. She wasn't bad at cooking. She just had never done it before. Not properly. She had made do with whatever she could find. Gas station sandwiches, cheap ramen, cold leftovers eaten with her fingers. But standing here in this warm kitchen, with the smell of garlic and spices filling the air, it felt different. Mom handed her a knife. Chop the onions. Ginger frowned. I don't know how. Mom smiled. I'll show you. She guided Ginger's hands, slow and careful, until Ginger was slicing the onions on her own. It was oddly satisfying. Something about the rhythmic movement, the quiet focus of it. She didn't realize she was actually enjoying herself until Pip walked in, leaned against the counter, and grinned. "Oh my God," Pip said, eyes twinkling. "She's domestic." Ginger scowled. "Shut up." Pip just laughed. "Next thing we know, you'll be knitting scarves with Mom." Ginger pointed the knife at her. "I will stab you." Mom chuckled. "Not with my good knives, please." Pip winked. "See? You're already part of the family." Ginger's stomach twisted. Because Pip had said it so easily. Like it was true. And the worst part was, Ginger didn't snap back. She didn't say I'm not part of anything. She just went back to chopping. And that realization made her hands tremble. Just a little. Later that night, Ginger sat on the porch. The cold air stung her skin, crisp and sharp, grounding her. She needed to breathe. She needed to think. Because things were changing. And she didn't know how to stop it. The door creaked open behind her. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. "Thought I'd find you here," Pip said, plopping down next to her. Ginger exhaled, watching her breath curl in the air. "You stalking me now?" Pip smirked. "Obviously." They sat in silence for a while. The sky stretched above them, vast and endless, dotted with faint stars. Then, quietly, Pip said, "You're scared." Ginger stiffened. "I'm not." Pip just looked at her. Ginger clenched her jaw. "I'm not scared." Pip tilted her head. "Then why do you keep looking at the door like you expect to run?" Ginger's stomach twisted. She hadn't realized she was doing that. Pip sighed, leaning back on her elbows. "You know, it's okay to want to stay." Ginger inhaled sharply. "I don't." Pip didn't argue. She didn't need to. The silence did that for her. Ginger swallowed hard. "I can't." She stopped herself. Because she didn't actually know what she was trying to say. Pip sighed, stretching her legs out. "Look, no one's asking you to stay forever. No one's asking you for anything." Ginger clenched her fists. "Then why?" Pip looked at her. "Why what? Why does everyone here?" Ginger exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Why does everyone care?" Pip stared at her for a long moment. Then she said, softly, "Because someone has to." Ginger's throat felt tight. She turned away. "That's not how the world works." Pip let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, well, maybe that's why we built something better here." Ginger swallowed hard. Because she didn't have an answer for that. Because deep down, she wanted to believe it. But wanting something had never worked out for her before. And she didn't know if she was ready to start hoping now. She didn't leave that night. She didn't even pack her bag. She just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out when staying had started feeling like less of a prison. And more like a choice. The next morning, she woke up before Pip. That had never happened before. She lay there for a minute, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house waking up around her. Then, without thinking, she got up. Without thinking, she grabbed the green shirt she had bought with Julie and pulled it on. Without thinking, she went downstairs and poured herself a cup of coffee. Julie blinked at her from across the table. "Look at you. Fully domesticated." Ginger rolled her eyes, taking a sip. "You're so annoying." Julie grinned. "You love me." Ginger scowled. "I really don't." Julie just smirked, taking a sip of her own coffee. Mom walked in, pausing when she saw Ginger at the table. She didn't say anything. Didn't make a big deal out of it. She just smiled. And somehow, that made it worse. Because Ginger knew. Mom knew. And for the first time, Ginger didn't feel the urge to prove her wrong. Ginger didn't wake up with a plan to stay. She didn't wake up with a plan to leave, either. She just woke up. And somehow, that was worse. Because before, her thoughts had been clear. Leave. Run. Survive. Simple. But now? Now, everything was messy. Now, she was waking up in a bed she didn't plan to stay in, pulling on clothes she hadn't meant to own, drinking coffee at a kitchen table that wasn't supposed to be hers. She had let herself settle into this place like it was temporary. But temporary had started to feel suspiciously like home. And Ginger didn't know what to do with that. She lingered in the kitchen longer than she meant to. Julie had left for work. June was in the laundry room, humming to herself. The house had settled into its mid-morning quiet, where people came and went, where things moved without chaos. Ginger wasn't used to that. She wasn't used to the way this place breathed, how it existed even when she wasn't paying attention. The houses she had stayed in before were nothing like this. They were places where people tried to act normal but failed, where every room felt like it was waiting to be torn apart. This house didn't feel like that. It felt real. And that was what unsettled her the most. She was pouring herself another cup of coffee because apparently that was a thing she did now when Mom walked in. She was holding a sweater, folding it neatly in her hands. "Morning, sweetheart." Ginger stiffened at the word. She still wasn't sure how to respond when Mom said things like that. She never said it like she expected anything in return. She just said it. Like it was true. Ginger swallowed. "Morning." Mom set the sweater down on a chair. "I was about to head out for a bit. Want to come with me?" Ginger frowned. "Where?" "Just a few errands. Grocery store. Hardware store." Mom smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thought you might like to get out for a little while." Ginger hesitated. Because this was another one of those things she wasn't used to. The asking. People didn't ask if she wanted to go places. They either told her to come along or left her behind. Mom, though. Mom always asked. And it made Ginger's stomach twist in ways she didn't understand. She should say no. She should find an excuse, say she was busy, say she didn't want to. But the words didn't come. Instead, she found herself nodding. And that terrified her. The drive into town was quiet. Not in a tense way. Just easy. The kind of silence that didn't demand to be filled. Mom hummed along to the radio, tapping her fingers lightly against the steering wheel as the van rolled down the road. Ginger stared out the window, watching the small-town world pass by. She still wasn't used to places like this. She had spent so much time in cities, in places that swallowed people whole, in places where no one looked twice at a girl like her. But here, people noticed each other. She could see it as they passed the shops, people stopping on the sidewalk to chat, waving to each other across the street, moving through the world like they belonged in it. It was unnerving. She wasn't sure if she hated it, or if she wanted to know what it felt like. The grocery store was a small, family-run place, not the giant, impersonal kind Ginger was used to. It smelled like bread and something sweet, and the bell over the door jingled when they walked in. Mom grabbed a cart, steering it down the aisles at a leisurely pace. Ginger kept her hands stuffed in her pockets, trailing behind. Mom didn't rush. She moved like she had all the time in the world, occasionally picking up a box or a can, checking labels, deciding things with a patience that Ginger couldn't understand. When you spent your life scraping by, you didn't browse. You grabbed what you needed and got out. Mom, though? Mom took her time. Like she trusted there would always be more food tomorrow. Like she trusted that things wouldn't just disappear. Ginger didn't know how to live like that. Didn't know if she could.
Please subscribe my channel for the next part. And visit my Patreon page for early access.